Hello, class. This is Achiri, and thank you a lot for attending the class. And we did touch on so many things. I hope you're not kind of like overwhelmed. We are going to pick them. Some of the critical issues we talked about, we'll pick them one after the other, and we'll discuss them, and you will get a mastery of them as we go along. Since it was an introductory class, I had to give you like kind of a broad overview. So now, two students. There is one student who wasn't in class. She's not well, and another they said they would like me to help. So I decided to do this PowerPoint to recapitulate some of what we did in class today, particularly the second part, and then I will do another video on your assignments and the syllabus, to go through the assignments and the syllabus and the pre-class assignments, so that I help you. I want you to be comfortable and to know where we are going, so that you know how to best contribute, how to think about the issues, and how to make the best use of the class. My goals in this class, the objectives are stated in the syllabus. So my goals is not just for you to master environmental studies and to see the connections between environmental studies and sustainability and your major, how it can influence your major, or how you can use it to influence your major, and how also through your major you can influence environmental studies, not just academically here at school, but also professionally. When you get out and you're working in your industry, very often you'll be working with guys that didn't take a course on the environment. And we know that almost every industry deals with the environment today. Almost every industry has policies, environmental policies. Most of them do have environmental divisions. And so I want the course to place you in a way that by the time you complete your studies, you should be in a powerful position to be involved in the environmental management, environment and sustainability department or specialization of your company, and to make sure that the policies, they adopt good policies and that they implement those policies. Very often when students go for interviews, you might go for an interview and you're all engineers, but then if you have a minor in environment, or if you took courses in environment and you're very conscious and aware of the environmental issues, very often you have an edge over the others, because you could help with sustainability. You could help with developing sustainable products, environmentally friendly products. In that way you make your corporation to be closer to the community. Okay. The third dimension there is also that environmental studies, environment and sustainability studies helps you to be a wonderful citizen, not just for yourself, taking care of the environment, your home, your neighborhood, but also being helpful, to your neighborhood, your community, your municipality, your county, your state. So by mastering the environmental issues, you can become a much more engaged, uh, uh, first of all, engaged homeowner. Knowing you could be a much more engaged homeowner in terms of sustainability, biodiversity in the community, community care. Uh, you could be a better person in your community, promoting healthy living, healthy environments. Your county, your municipality, you could engage your municipality in those issues. I know at this at moment, most of us are asking, but how to engage the municipality? I guess when you get a home, right? When you buy a home, you will start thinking of about what the municipality is doing, and whether they are taking the right decisions, implementing the right decisions about the community, about water issues, the water you get in your tap, about sanitation, about clean air, about clean energy, about the soil, about the biodiversity, all of those aspects which enhance the quality of life, not just for you and your family, but also for your neighbors, your neighborhood, your community more broadly. And those are all aspects of good stewardship, good citizenship. Our aim, all of us, is to build a community that is robust, that is resilient, that is healthy, that is good for our children, for us, and for the children, and for the future, and for the country. We want to build model societies, want to build communities and societies and cities, counties, cities, states that are exemplary, right? Okay, and so that's what I want. If this course can help in that dimension, personal, community, professional, that would be great. So we started the course with, I will go to the syllabus and the film that we watched on the rivers. We started with the critical aspects of the commons. And when we talk about the commons, we're talking about those resources that are critical to life, that are critical to every organism, including humans, because humans are also organisms, right? And these aspects that are critical to every organism, we have land. First of all, we work on land. 2, we get food out of land. 3, we build on land. We travel on land. All our lives depend on land and soil. You cannot extricate us from land and soil. We are also buried on land. So our ancestors, they are on the land that we walk, the soil that we walk. Our ancestors are there and we are living. So our lives are integrated with land. How do we manage land? If you look at waste, right? If we, one person drops a Coke bottle out there after drinking, another one drops a bottle, another one drops a single-use plastic bottle, and we just drop. Okay, it starts with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then after 5 years, if the school doesn't straighten up, this whole campus will be a mess, right? And they will have bottles with water, with bacteria inside of those bottles, and then anything can happen, an epidemic can happen. So land is very crucial, and we are concerned about land pollution. We are concerned about pesticides. We are concerned about use of pesticides, insecticides. Take like the lawn. When we use pesticides and insecticides on the lawn, right? What about the rabbits that eat on the lawns? What about the squirrels? What about the ducks? What about the doves? What about the birds? What about even our dogs? When we walk the dogs, sometimes they eat the grass, right? Okay, what about the bees? Bees enhance pollution. Now, when we kind of use pesticides on plants, what about the bees? If we kill the bees and there is no pollution, what about agriculture? You know, so we start taking a system approach. We have to always think, when we talk of environmental studies, we are talking of interdisciplinary studies. Interdisciplinary, we are also talking of a system approach. We take a system vision of the environment. And that makes it a little more complex when we take a system perspective. And when you look at land, land is a system. It's a cultural system, it's an economic system, it's a biological system, it's a legal system. All of those things converge on land, right? So we have to set up, we have to understand all those dimensions of land and land management, okay? And in this book, which we are going to look at, I think there is a chapter on lawns. I think chapter 16 or 17 is on lawns. And so those of you who are interested in lawns and the use of pesticides on lawns and the ramification, you could already plan to, it's chapter 16, you could plan to work on that chapter on lawns, and that really relates to land. We're also going to look at land in chapter 5, ethics, land ethics, Aldo Leopold. We're going to look at land ethics. How do we relate to land? Ethics has to do with relations. How do we relate to land in a moral way, right? Okay, then we look at water, and we said that the human body is about 70% water, right? And water, we drink water every single day, right? We drink water every single day. Where does it come from? How clean are the sources? How managed are the sources? What about the pipes that bring water, the infrastructure that brings water to our kitchens? Where does the wastewater go? So we're concerned about the critical nature of water, the essential nature of water to agriculture, to dairy products, to cattle, animals, birds, biodiversity, to reducing the temperatures, of, reducing the temperatures, and water also acting as a filter to radioactive rays. We are talking in this sense of the hydrological cycle or the water cycle, right? So water is crucial to life in almost every dimension of life that we can think about. Almost all your, most of the industries you will involve in, they would use water, right? Or they'll have relations with water management one way or the other, whether it's data. You go to agencies that produce water, they have to deal with data. 7 million people in New York City. You have to start looking at cubic feet of clean water. Where will the water come from? What of the infrastructure? What of sanitation? All of that. You know, you start looking at those applications. Manage the oceans. How do we manage the oceans? How do we manage the lakes and the fisheries? How do we manage the ponds? You know, what role do they contribute, like, to climate change? You know, disappearance of water. How does it contribute to climate change? And how can water act as carbon sinks? You know, sinking the carbon and the pollution in the atmosphere. You know, and water and recreation, water and ecotourism, right? Nowadays, during summer, all of us will go where the water is, right? What if that water disappears? What happens? So we're going to look at water as a critical life, how to manage, how to govern water, water governance, from land governance, land ethics, we go to water governance, and we talk of water ethics, how to relate with water, how to relate with the rivers, you know, the rivers that source our cities, the rivers that, you know, they fertilize our fields, the fish, you know, they produce fish, and navigation, also use rivers for navigation, and they also help in mitigating climate change. We also talk about governing floods. How do we manage floods? And that's a very complex territory. Which we'll come to. Then we talk about light, and when we talk about light, we talk of energy. We depend on light for electricity. We depend on light for vision, you know, and artificial light sources. What are the impacts of artificial light sources on wildlife? You know, so light also comes in important. Solar energy, the production of solar energy as opposed to fuel, right? So understanding light is also important. Then we talk about air. And when we talk about air, we talk about the essential nature of air, right? The air we breathe. So air cleanliness. How clean is the air we breathe? We don't even think about it until it really gets bad. And that's another aspect which we will look as we get along. The temporal problems with environmental issues. Sometimes by the time we discover an environmental issue, the issue has already gone out of hands. You know, because it starts with 1 thing, 2 things, 3 things, 4 things, and before it spreads and starts threatening the city, that's when we take note of it. And also, by the time solutions are taken, it may take years, because those solutions, they have to go through activists. Activists have to start fighting. Maybe environmental movement has to start fighting, and then it goes to Congress. And then Congress, they're moving back and forth. They're arguing how decisions may affect the economy, this and that. And by the time it's 3 years, when a law is passed, the problem is also, there is that temporal, that time aspect. When was the problem recognized, and when were solutions taken? By the time the problem is already there. So we'll also look at air issues related with air health, you know, not only individual health, but also community health. We look at pollution, we look at air transport, urban transportation, and we look at industrial pollution. We have to look at all of those and how they can be mitigated and how they can be governed. So think about those elements as central to virtually every topic we have to deal with when it comes to environment and sustainability, because those elements are central to our life every day, every hourly livelihoods. You know, they're central to our livelihoods and to our communities. Okay. Now, these are resources that are vital to life, that are shared by and accessible to all. So we talk of land, light, water, and air. They are vital to life, and they are shared by all. They cannot be solely possessed or controlled by one entity. If we talk of water, most communities, water is controlled by the community. One person cannot buy all the water. For example, you decide to buy all the lake. You decide to buy the entire lake. You decide to buy a sea. You decide to buy the ocean. People will say no. If you say you want to buy the whole United States, the whole land in the United States, if you say you want to buy all of the land in Worcester, people will say no. It's owned by the community, right? You want to build an industry by a river, it becomes a community issue. The whole community starts fighting because it's going to poison. So they have to look at ways in which we could survive with industries without the entire community being endangered, right? And so these resources are vital to almost every living organism. And so the management cannot be left in the hands of one person. It has to be a citizen issue, a community issue, right? Traditionally, in many societies, land, particularly fertile ground and forest, has been managed collectively by communities for activities like grazing or timber extraction. If you look at the forest in the Amazon, right? Most of the forests in the Amazon, they're owned by communities. They were owned by indigenous communities. And now the state owns most of those forests, and communities, they also have a hand. They can't sell the entire forest in the Amazon to one people can only own patches of it, but they also have laws governing how they extract and use those forests. Remember that even here in Worcester, United States, you can't just go out and cut down a tree and cut down a tree in your front yard, like the trees on the streets here. No, you can't cut them down. You need a permit from the municipality. It's because those trees, they are kind of collective property. We call them the commons. They're owned by all. They're collectively owned by all, at least officially, right? Okay. So contemporary challenges to land: increasing privatization. When land is privatized, leading to enclosure. When they privatize land and enclose it, it limits access. For example, we talk of one of the aspects of the commons we have here in Worcester. This forest up the hill, this forest up the hill, Elm Park, that's the commons, right? So, but if they privatize Elm Park, then they would deprive the whole community of the vital nature of that park in terms of recreation, in terms of a space, a breathing space, in terms of that park helps in reducing carbon. It soaks up carbon from the atmosphere, it soaks up the pollution, and if you want to escape the noise pollution in the city, it's always a quiet space there at the park there where you can go lie on the grass and read, in quiet, in silence, without much traffic, traffic pollution, right? So privatization, you can't privatize that park. And so we have aspects like that in the US, like the parks in the US, all the parks in the US, Yellowstone, Yosemite, all of that, those are common property. They're common to all the United States, and the state manages them for everyone. Those are the commons, right? So the concept of commoning the land aims to resist the trend by promoting shared management. Shared management. The parks, it's shared management in most, in various instances, you get the state and neighboring communities managing areas of that park. Equitable access. Equitable access means you cannot restrain certain people from entering those parks. Though up till the 1950s, blacks were kind of like both restrained and afraid. But right now, post 50s, those parks are open to everyone. You cannot restrain someone from going to Elms Park. That would be illegal. You can't restrain someone from going to Institute Park, which is near Salisbury Pond down here. That would be, so though it's a common property. So examples of the commons in terms of land, we have community gardens, we have urban farms, community gardens, we have them in Worcester, about 6, 7, or 8 of them, community gardens. All of you could go there and get a little piece of land there to farm. It is free. You get it from the state or from some NGOs to do your garden. It's free. You don't have to pay anything. You don't have to give back. You produce your vegetables, crops, flowers, anything. It's free. That's the common property approach, and those are that land is considered as the commons. It's good for the welfare for the society. It's good for the poorer families that cannot afford vegetables. They go there, or who that cannot afford organic food. They can go to those community gardens in town. And some of your colleagues have done videos on community gardens. We'll go back to the videos on the environment environment and sustainability series, video series on YouTube. I'll show you so that you can watch the video. So that's that with land. A lot of issues involving land. It involves land and forestry, and water is also found on land, and land relates also to agriculture. So land is very, very critical, and the governance, how it is managed, how it is governed, is critical. Okay, we'll be looking into that. We'll look into that on this chapter. There's a chapter here on forestry, here environment and society. There's a chapter on parks. There's a chapter on parks, and that's chapter 5. And there's also a chapter on trees. That's chapter 12 on trees. And there's also on trees. I think that's it for and also institutions and the commons. Okay, so now we go to water. Water is an ubiquitous resource. Ubiquitous means it exists everywhere. The water cycle exists everywhere. Even the air we breathe, it's got water, right? Underground, underneath our feet, we have underground water, underground aquifers, underground water, which are also managed. Like if you go to California, you'll find out that much of the underground water in California, there are many farmers that have paid for the underground water for 25 years. They've bought the underground water. So if there's a shortage of water in the city, the farmers will have priority. They will have priority first because they paid for the water. And that's a law, that's a system that many people are fighting against, because in that sense, the water has been privatized very often without the community knowing. Those are the things they're talking about, privatization. Privatization runs against the commons. Okay. Rivers, lakes, oceans are inherently shared resources crucial for survival and sustenance. Challenges and management. Water resources face threats from pollution, over extraction and privatization. Pollution, over extraction and privatization. Over extraction, for example, by farms. Privatization, very often by farms. Then we talk of pollution. A lot of pollution, much of the waste in the city, when it rains, it ends up in lakes, right? It ends up in lakes and ponds. Managing water as a commons necessitates effective governance, balancing competing interests. Competing interests, when you talk of water like a river, you have competing interests there. You have navigators who want plenty of water so that their ships and boats could go up and down. You have fisheries who want plenty of water, and you have farmers who are extracting, and you have real estate who build along waterfronts. And so there is tension between all these different groups. Some want to extract more water, and some want more water in the water bed, like for navigation, for fisheries, for boating, So then the real estate owners, they don't want anyone even like using the water, So there's all the tensions coming, and how to manage, how to balance these competing interests. How do you balance these competing interests? Examples, cooperative irrigation systems and community-led water delivery services are practical applications of water management as a commons. So you have cooperative irrigation. You have, we do have some of that in the Midwest where there's cooperative irrigation. We have lots of it in India where communities come together and they create an irrigation system. Because the infrastructure is expensive, they create an irrigation system, and they manage the irrigation system in a way to save water and make water equitable delivery, both for agriculture and for domestic uses, right? So there is the water governance is a very, very big issue, and you look at rivers, it's even more intense. And then you look at climate change and icebergs melting, and flooding. So if we don't govern climate, the change in climate, the icebergs melt, and so that increased flooding and destruction of urban property and lives, right? And then we move to light. Light as a commons. Sunlight is vital to life and a clean energy source. It can be considered a commons. It's inherently accessible to all. Sunlight is inherently accessible to all. Artificial light and encroachment. However, the overuse of artificial light can lead to light pollution and encroaching on the natural environment, creating a form of degradation, right? Okay, solutions, initiatives promoting responsible lighting practices and renewable energy sources that rely on natural light. Light is energy. And so when we have alternatives like solar energy, it helps to reduce our dependence on kind of electricity, right? Electricity, which producing artificial light. So we use solar energy, and so we look at light again and energy, and how expensive it is, and the carbon print. When we talk of carbon print, we're talking the amount of natural resources that are used to produce light, the amount of natural resources that are used to produce energy. We want to use light sources which don't consume, the production of which doesn't consume a lot of earth resources. Then we talk of air, and this is where this is really, really critical. The atmosphere is a global commons. We talk of the atmosphere above the earth, right? It's essential for breathing, climate regulation, shared by all inhabitants of the earth. So when we talk about flight, those of you working in aeronautic engineering, we're concerned about flight pollution by aeroplanes, the amount of aeroplanes flying each day, and the amount of pollution they produce. And so that's an issue. We can't talk about managing the global commons, the air, without talking about transport systems, human transport systems, whether they are ships, from docks to ships, to planes, to urban transportation, trains, and all of that. To manage air quality, we have to look for a way to produce energy. We have to look for sources of energy that are clean, right? And you've probably heard a lot about clean energy, using clean energy, electric cars. But electric cars, do they produce clean energy? Electric cars themselves, the production of electric cars takes away a lot of Earth's resources. It leads to a huge carbon print. And we are going to look at carbon print and ecological print. Carbon print is the amount of carbon that is produced while producing a resource. So if they produce a computer, there's also energy that is released, that is produced, resources that are wasted, and energy that is released, and all of that, they go to carbon print. It's very, very significant because most industries are involved with production, so they're involved with carbon printing. Okay, managing the air commons. Okay, so when we look at air pollution is considerable. You have to go to big cities like New York, Chicago, Los Angeles to really understand the depth of this issue of pollution. Here in Worcester, the air in Worcester is pretty clean. We have a lot of trees that soak up the carbon, a lot of trees. It's absolutely a very, very green place. So those trees, they soak up the carbon, they mitigate. Air, it's one of the issues that is managing air quality. It's also big, and you look at the diseases that people have, chronic pulmonary lung diseases from air, from children, and you talk of almost every autumn, you talk of people sniffing here and then you have to go for vaccines and all of that. And it's all related to airborne diseases, right? Managing the air commons. Addressing climate change and air pollution requires international cooperation, collective action, and transitioning towards cleaner energy sources. Initiatives like carbon pricing and emissions. We're going to look at carbon pricing. We're going to look at carbon pricing on page chapter 11 here. It's dedicated all to carbon, how to regulate, how to understand the carbon prices and efforts, national and international efforts to regulate carbon production and atmospheric pollution. Okay, then governance of the commons. So when we talk of governance is different from government. When you talk of the term most of us are used to is government, like the United States government, the Canadian government. But that term government, it came from governance, and governance means the act of managing resources. So you can have a small group that manages their resources, and they can have governance. They have governance, they have principles like in New England, if you go to the coastal areas, right, you go to the coastal areas, the fishermen, they have a set of rules, right, on quotas, fishing areas, times of fishing, culprits. That's governance. They don't have a government like the government of the United States, but they do practice what is called governance. So governance can take place at any level, at the group level, at the community level, at the locality level, at the county level, at the state level, at the country level, at the international level. The governance, we talk of the governance of the resources. But when you talk of government as a set of people and institutions like the government in the United States, that issues from governance, but that's just one aspect of governance. Is government. Government is just one aspect of governance. When you institutionalize it, and then you may have an NGO, community. You have community organizations that are involved with governance, in governing the commons. So take note of that term, governance, governance of the commons. You know, it doesn't mean the national government. It just means the practices of any particular group and the policies to manage particular resources within their area. Land, water, light, and air are fundamental elements that embody the principles of the commons. So land, water, light, and air, the fundamental elements that embody the principles of the commons. These principles of the commons, we are going to see them in chapter 4. What are the principles? How can we manage the commons? How can we manage WPI in terms of security to make all of us safe? What makes all of us safe in WPI? If you have to look at what is it that makes all of us safe in WPI, there are certain principles there that we don't see them, right? But we can, by looking at this chapter and looking at how the commons are managed, we can see the principles that makes us safe in WPI, that makes things in WPI run. You know, like we have light, we have water, we have this. Something goes wrong, it's corrected immediately. Somebody does something, if you hit somebody on campus, the campus police, they respond immediately. You know, someone falls down, the ambulance comes. There's governance. I know there's a university government, but very often, some of us that are not involved in that government were also involved in the decision-making processes, the everyday life. And those are aspects of governance. Okay, we will be examining these principles in chapter 4 of Environment and Society, chapter 4 here, right? Okay, the sustainable management necessitates collaborative approaches. When we talk of governance, we talk of collaboration, collaborative governance. If we don't collaborate, things might start getting nasty. We need in the family, you need collaboration in the family, right? Amongst your friends, you collaborate. When there's no collaborate, it becomes dysfunctional. When there's no collaboration in the family, it becomes a dysfunctional family. When there's no collaboration in the group, in the community, in the county, it becomes a dysfunctional group, county, right? Things don't function. For things to be functioning, there must be collaboration. When you drive, there's collaboration on the highway, right? There are principles there. When you drive on the highway, there are principles, laws that you must follow, codes that you must respect. They are institutionalized. They are written down. They've been passed through parliament, right? And that's because the highway is a commons. The highway is common property. You cannot buy the U.S. highways and own them, right? It cannot be private property. It's common property. And so the state manages it for us. You have county roads, you have state roads, and also have national highways, right? And those are different aspects of the commons. So I hope you understand this aspect of the commons now, where the term originated, and what the basic commons being light, water, air, light, water, land, and those are the basic commons, but there are also other commons, right? Like we've talked of the highway, we've talked of parks, right? Those are human created, they are human created commons, right? Okay, so I hope you understand the term, the commons now. Now the group that we're presenting on institutions and the commons, now you can go read institutions and the commons, and you go to files, you go to PowerPoint. There's a PowerPoint there on the commons. If you want me to give you 3 PowerPoints on that chapter, I will give you, and it will make it easy for you to present a lively chapter when it gets to that. You know, same with the other chapters. There's enough material like PowerPoints that I could give you after you read. You could have 2 or 3 PowerPoints. Then that will enable you to present give a lively presentation. Then giving your own community, your own background experiences, your own community experiences of that issue, and you have an A+ grade, A+++. Okay. Then now let's move to Rachel Carson. We did talk about Rachel Carson. I'm a huge fan of Rachel Carson. I'm a huge fan of Rachel Carson. You know, and it began since childhood when I was about 9 or 10, I picked up Silent Spring. I was in Africa. I used to read up a tree. I climb up a tree, take a novel, a mango tree, and one day I went to my father's library and I picked up Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. The first chapter was so wonderful. When I read it, I said, wow. Then I went to chapter 2 and she started talking about chemicals and pesticides. And growing up in Africa, we didn't use them because, we didn't have pesticides. And so I was so disappointed. I said, oh no, I thought it was a novel, Silent Spring. I thought it was a novel where all the birds died and I want to see if the birds came back. But it was so I was disappointed until I came back to I went to university and took up environmental studies. Then I started reading it for a class. And I said, wow, finally I can understand Rachel Carson. And then I came to the US and everybody told me that Rachel Carson, you cannot be an environmentalist without knowing Rachel Carson. And I started reading Rachel Carson, almost all her books. Now, then I discovered what Rachel Carson did for the US. It's phenomenal what she did. Just the laws that she enabled the country to pass, the Clean Water Act, it enables all of us to drink clean water now from the tap. Like here in Worcester, you can get clean water from the tap because they are not destroyed by industries. A lot of the industries that were sited along riverbanks here in Massachusetts in the 18th and 19th century, industries were sited along rivers. So Rachel Carson Act cleaned up all of that. Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act. And so this book, read the first 3 chapters and see for yourselves, and then watch that film of hers. So this is the video of her. Watch it. And then Rachel Carson was born in 1907 and she died in 1964. Actually, she died of cancer. Those are the things she was fighting to prevent. She died of cancer in 1964, just the very 1 year after the book came out. She was an American marine biologist, author, and conservationist, best known for her book Silent Spring, which is credited with advancing the environmental movement. Rachel Carson did live and work in Massachusetts. So she lived here. She lived in Pennsylvania most of the time, but she was born in Pennsylvania, but she also spent time in Washington, D.C., spent summers in Woods Hole in Massachusetts, where she worked at the Marine Biological Laboratory and U.S. Fishery Stations. She also spent time in Maine. I think one of you comes from Maine. Who spoke of Maine in class? I forgot the name. I'll find out. Yeah. So she also spent time in Maine, and she wrote most of the books in Maine, where she had a summer cottage, right? Okay. So, quote, the more clearly we can focus our attention on the wonders and realities of the universe about us, the less taste we shall have for destruction. So the more clearly we can focus our attention on the wonders and beauties of the universe around us, the less taste we shall have for destruction. So if we understand and we're able to see the wonders and the beauties and the realities of the world, we will not want to destroy it. We want to keep it, to enjoy it, and to hand it to the future generations. Silent Spring set up an environmental alarm and it exposed widespread pesticide use, especially DDT, by the military-industrial complex post-World War II. It documented the poisoning of birds, fish, soil, organisms. It challenged chemical corporations' impunity. The fact that chemical corporations, they could poison the earth and they go with impunity. So all those, so there is this nice quotes from her. And in nature, nothing exists alone. Interconnectedness, like rivers. In nature, everything is interconnected. Everything in nature, from the organisms, they're interconnected. Bees, pollination, humans' dependence on pollination by bees. Also human impact on the environment. The control of nature is a phrase conceived of arrogance. Controlling nature. We work with nature. We understand nature. We don't control nature. And you get sometimes if you get pests in the garden, do you know that you can use plants, to chase away pests from your garden? Use plants, use pepper. If you use pepper and you have bugs attacking your cabbage or lettuce, there's pepper that you buy. You just use the pepper, you sprinkle it, and the bugs, they will smell it and they will disappear immediately. You don't need sprays. You don't need you don't need chemical sprays that will kill those bugs and also kill the organisms the soil like worms and all of that, right? So controlling nature, it's good working with rather than controlling nature, controlling the rain, controlling the rivers, controlling the ocean. When nature fights back, it can be very destructive, like floods, like hurricanes, floods, all of that. It can be very, very destructive. So we work with nature rather than nature is such a powerful force. You can control it only for some of the time, but it will eventually fight back. Legislative ripple effects. So let's look at the major acts that were passed as a result of Rachel Carson's struggle. The Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act 1963, the Clean Water Act 1972, and the Endangered Species Act of 1973. And then the Toxic Substances Control Act of 1976, which authorized the EPA to monitor and regulate nuclear. First of all, the EPA was set up, I think, 1971, with Rachel Carson's influence. And this EPA and this Toxic Substances Act, it authorized the EPA to monitor and regulate new chemicals. Okay, it directly addressed the pesticide risks that Carson warned about. So Carson's broader impact, EPA created 1970, DDT banned 1972, raising environmental consciousness and ethics, right? And then legacy and lessons. Carson demonstrated the power of science and communication. If you follow that video, you'll see how she used science. And not only science, but communication. Many of you will be scientists, technologists, but do you know that communication is also important? And that's why I got students in my courses to learn how to make movies, to communicate some of their research, some of their projects, some of their concerns, their scientific, technological concerns, to communicate it, to inspire environmental activism and policy, because you educate the world. As WPI students, you have millions of students across the world, and you are in a unique position because this is a high quality establishment with a lot of facilities, and project-based learning is unique to us. You are in a unique position to carry out projects and educate the world. And sometimes it means doing archival projects, creating videos, podcasts, and all of that. And you don't know, there's one video that some students produced, and I think in this South American country, within a month, they had like 600 people watching it, which means the video had a huge transformative effect on them. It was on a young environmental activist, 23 years. I think, is it in Peru? Yeah, I will show you that video. Okay, so watch the video and then try to answer these questions here, right? And also watch this video. This is the present director of the EPA and how she looks at the regulations. So this is all for now. I'll do a next video on the syllabus and your assignments to help you through, because I don't want you to be stressed. I don't just want you to pass this class. I want you to excel. And I want you to learn. I want the class to transform you as a person. I want the class to enable you to not just get through with academia, but also work in the environmental sustainability section in any enterprise where you are. You have to be the environment and sustainability expert, and also to be a voice in your community for environmental concerns, sustainability concerns, clean air, clean water, clean energy. So you make your community what you want, and a place where your children would be happy to live in future. Okay, so for me, that's my passion as an environmentalist and as a lecturer. It's not just to lecture, but it's to transform. It's to transform, because collectively we can make the world a better place. I believe in it. I'm not a pessimist. I'm not a pessimist. I believe that collectively it starts with one person at a time, one person at a time. You may not convince the whole world, but you can convince one person at a time about the need for consciousness, the need for action, the need for clean air, the air we breathe each time you breathe. You want that air to be clean. You don't want to breathe air which after 5 years you're going to the hospital with lung problems, with cancer and all of those issues. No. We want good health. You want all the products that you buy from the supermarket, the chicken, you buy. And we are going to come to that when we start talking about plastics and the use of plastics in packaging and all of that, and how microplastics get to us through packaging. You know, we want the food that we eat to be decent food, to be healthy food, to be plastic free, to be free of chemicals, right? We're going to go into those details and things that Rachel Carson spurred and started us to start thinking about critically, you know, almost every aspect of our lives, the products that we use. How healthy are the products that we use? Sometimes the cost might get a little scary. Like each time I buy beef, you know, I tremble, and I very much think of becoming a vegetarian, because not because beef is bad, but because the beef that we get from the stores, there are huge questions. There are huge questions about how healthy they are, you know. So, and it's not just that, but if we could get the stores, you know, from the farms to the stores to produce very healthy, and that would mean a lot of things. So it's a course that it's very rich. It goes many dimensions, and we have the tools and the materials to think with, and to actually transform ourselves, you know, and our relations, and also help to transform the communities, and also the future, transform life for future communities. Okay, I'll end here and post this video to you, and then I'll do another video probably tomorrow on the syllabus, you know, on the assignments and the syllabus, so that we are clear about every step. Okay, good, great. I'll post it right away.